Hi everyone, I'm joined by Anna today, and Anna is a Toronto-based product designer, and she's passionate in crafting elegant solutions to complex human-centered problems. And before becoming a product designer, Anna has a background in visual arts and graphic design. She graduated from a graphic design program at York University and Sheridan College. Anna is currently designing at Forma AI, a B2B startup that focuses on automated sales incentive compensation processes for sales teams. Could you tell us a little bit about how you actually got your first design job?
Yeah, sure. I think going back to how I got into digital design and me wanting to learn more about it is in university, actually. In second year, I was looking through like design jobs, but I wasn't very confident in my abilities to work full-time or in internships because my portfolio was very young back then. So luckily my school had a work study program called, I think it's a work study program at York. And I applied to a lot of graphic design opportunities at my school. So I landed in a role called web and graphic design at an IT department at York. So that's how I got my first job. It was a nice blend of digital design and marketing design. So I would say that that was my first job. And it was a good add-on to my resume because later on, I was able to find a first UI UX design internship role at a small design agency in Vancouver, BC. That was a part of my design placement course at my school. So it was a nice change in scenery moving from Toronto to Vancouver. And I guess that's how I got into UI UX design.
That's really cool. What were some of the challenges you faced getting into the job?
Yes. Luckily, it was before COVID-19. I think UI UX design was getting popular in the job market. So it was easy to apply to like everywhere. I would say that a challenge would be my interview skills. So it was my first time like applying and trying to do interviews with a company. And I struggled on that a lot because I wasn't confident in my soft skills, but I was very confident in my hard skills. So I kind of wanted the recruiters to know that this is my work, my portfolio, this is everything that I've done, but it has to reflect on how I'm doing interviews. So that's something that I struggled on in university, but with a lot of practice, I think I've gotten like really better at it. Yeah.
What are some things you did to practice to get better at interviewing?
I would say that I've done a lot of research on common questions that recruiters would ask you or a design manager would ask you, and reaching out to my friends who have done interviews is very helpful. And then I would take notes of my talking points and trying to answer these questions as best as I can. And I think having notes in the back of your pocket is very helpful in memorizing them. But I think in the beginning, I guess I would struggle a lot with it, trying to memorize like what I want to say, or and then later on, I think I would not even follow a script or talking points and just like be genuine about what I'm talking about in like by talking about my experience, my design skills, and any questions that they throw at me. So I think a starting point would be having some talking notes and also practicing with friends is very helpful too because they'll be real with you and they'll tell you what you're struggling on in interviews.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that a lot actually, just because I was so set on making sure I have like a perfect interview. So I would try to memorize everything, all the questions. Like I would want to make sure that I'm I'm 100% comfortable with how I want to answer. So it ended up almost feeling unnatural and almost like an act when you start to memorize it. And a lot of the recent interviews I've done, I just stopped. If I know the questions, I kind of think about it as a conversation. And I found that made the process feel more human than robotic. So that's what's worked for me. But yeah, I can relate about not knowing exactly what to say. It's not always that you know the answer to the question. That's impossible.
For sure. And I think like being genuine with your answers helps the person interviewing you knowing who you are as a person and if they really want to work with you. I think that's a good point to add to that.
Yeah, totally. Like, what were some things that you tried but didn't end up working and you kind of just scrapped the idea?
In terms of job hunting and interviewing,
Yeah.
I think so. In interviewing for product design roles, there's a ton of steps. I think there are like 5 stages or more if it gets that intense. But I am not an expert in doing like whiteboard challenges or app design challenges. But in my first whiteboard challenge, it was last year actually. And I struggled on that a lot because I think thinking on the spot is a challenge on like given an amount of time to do that whiteboard challenge while also communicating with the person that you're doing the challenge with. I think I would have a a general notes about how I want to go about solving a whiteboard challenge. And then I think I would like pause and then look at my notes to see if I'm following a good structure in solving that problem. And I find it super awkward. And I felt it during the interview. So that for sure did not work. And it was my first whiteboard challenge. So I would say do not do that. But I think just doing a lot of practice is helpful in memorizing like what kind of structure you want to structure your whiteboard challenge. But having notes and not practicing it will stump me a lot.
Were there any specific tools that you use to help you with whiteboarding?
Yes. So I read this book called, I think, Solving Whiteboard Challenges. And it was very helpful in learning about what people look for in terms of solving a whiteboard challenge, and also doing a lot of reading up on how others solve whiteboard challenges on Medium, and then trying to think about the general structure that they use as a guideline in how I want to solve the whiteboard challenge. I would say that it was really helpful in me knowing what a whiteboard challenge actually is and what the recruiter wants out of it.
What were some things that you did to prepare yourself for your first job?
For my first job, I think after like I received the offer and signed it, I was very excited to be a part of a new company and learn from others. I think spending time by myself and reflecting on what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are is helpful in giving those and letting your manager know about yourself and where you want to work on and what you're interested in. So I think coming into a new job, I would come in with things I want to improve in and things I want to work on in terms of like projects. So I think that's a good starting point in letting someone know more about yourself, and also being open to learn from everyone and setting up coffee chats with people and having a starting point to build trust with your coworkers. Even though my internship is only 4 months, it's not a lot of time. So I wanted to be prepared and be ready to work with people.
I guess as another point, what were some things that you struggled with?
Coming into my first job, I think I was afraid of asking for help, knowing that everyone looked very busy. Even like the designers who like sit next to me, they look like they're very busy, wanting to meet deadlines for their projects. And I didn't want to bother them, even though we have Slack. I felt awkward to just message someone who's right beside me. So that was one thing I struggled on, and it had an impact on how I was performing. And I noticed that very clearly. So then, after like speaking to my friends at that time who were also interning, they told me to keep in mind that you're an intern, you're there to learn, and they expect you to ask a ton of questions. So keeping in mind of that, I just asked a ton of questions, as dumb as they can be. It kind of shows that I am learning and wanting to learn and not holding back. So, and that helped me a lot, I think, in my other internships following forward and my job. I'm not afraid to just ask the dumbest questions because it's important to like your learning and context gathering.
Yeah, I can totally echo that, because I think starting off in design, there's always this fear because you sell yourself short. You think that you don't have as much experience as everyone else. So you might tend to be uncomfortable with like stepping up or like asking questions. And I think what you were saying, like getting through that breaking point, I think you did like a self-assessment and realized that this is like a problem area for you, and you actively worked on it. You realize that and you learned from it, and now it's actually helped you in your other jobs.
For sure.
I know you were telling me that your first job, it was pre-COVID, so it was kind of different, but I know you had a recent experience with trying to get a job during COVID. I know this is deviating from the original topic, but I'm kind of curious to understand what were some of the challenges you came across, like going through the interview process, like during COVID, and actually finding a job during COVID.
Yes, it was kind of recent. It was last summer where I was finding a job during COVID. I think like during COVID last summer, the job market was pretty bad. There weren't a lot of jobs out there, even in the States or overseas in Canada. But I literally applied everywhere, the even though I don't have like 3 years of experience or like 4 years of experience, I just applied to them. But it was a challenge for sure, just finding the first interview, knowing that everyone, like a lot of people were laid off during that time. There's a lot of competition for design jobs. But I think in terms of interviewing, there wasn't that big of a difference than pre-COVID because I would interview remotely and present my portfolio remotely. So it wasn't that big of a change, except for like whiteboarding challenges where you would do whiteboard challenges on Miro or Figma as opposed to literally going into the office. But I think I got to know my interviewers pretty well remotely, so that's a good thing. I think landing on a job is difficult. I think that was a big challenge for me because a lot of people were unemployed at that time and trying to look for a job. So there was a lot of competition coming in, and as a junior, I felt like I was lacking in some way. So I did spend a lot of time looking for freelance opportunities and volunteer opportunities. So at least I am keeping myself motivated and working while also looking for a job. Yeah, that was my long experience finding a job during COVID. But luckily, I've landed on a place that I really liked, and it was exactly what I'm looking for. Like, there are a lot of startups in Toronto, and I wanted some experience designing for a fast paced and growing startup. So I'm very happy that finally I landed on a job during COVID.
That's awesome. I think you actually shared a lot of cool nuggets in there that folks can take away, because we are in that time right now where we are going through a pandemic and people are struggling to find jobs. I actually want to pull on a couple strings that you mentioned there. One of them being you mentioned you worked on some volunteer projects, and I'm curious to know, like, where did you go to find these projects to help build your portfolio?
Yeah, so there are a lot of online design communities out there. I think they were created because we can't connect with each other in person. So that's why I think there's a ton that were started during the pandemic. So I joined this club called Design Buddies, and they had a Discord channel where you're able to share your design work, connect with people, like fellow designers. So I found a lot of opportunities for like volunteer work, paid or unpaid, in a Discord channel. And I think it is a good way to find these opportunities because it is an easy way to like connect with people who are in that community and you share similar interests. So luckily a lot of people were posting about opportunities for like projects even though it is unpaid or paid. So that's where I got a few freelance projects out of online communities. And also angel.co. I think a lot of startups post opportunities on there, and some are freelance, some are part time or full time. So I went there looking for something that I can grab onto since I do have a lot of free time during that time.
Anna shared like a lot of great resources, so I'm going to make sure to link them below for everyone to access if you want to dig into those. Anna, can you tell me a little bit more about, in terms of like preparation? I know you mentioned, for example, like doing these volunteer projects was part of it. Were there other things that you had to modify or change in terms of like how you prepared for your interviews during COVID compared to pre-COVID?
I think during pre-COVID, I did practice on like interviewing, like recording myself on my computer, practicing through my answers. I think I did the same thing during COVID as well because I did have a lot of free time. So I was able to practice a lot. And I think one thing that I modified is since I did have a lot of practice, I sounded more confident. Like I could project my confidence much more because of like doing practice by recording myself and listening to myself. So I was aware of what I was struggling on and saying a lot of ums and having a lot of awkward silences. And I kind of just wanted to speak from myself and not follow scripts. But I did have like talking points, which are very helpful in guiding me through something and not forgetting what I wanted to say. So I would say that I didn't really change much in terms of preparation, but I think I noticed that with the practice I've gotten by recording myself and of being aware of how I'm answering questions, I was able to project more confidence in my interviews. So that's one thing that I got out of it, which I'm proud of. But even though like it was a long pandemic finding a job, I say that it was kind of worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome because I know how much work you did during this time, during COVID, trying to find a job and also build your portfolio in the midst of it. So virtual like high five on getting through that. I think that's a huge hurdle and a great learning experience. I want to end off with asking if there's any piece of advice you'd like folks to take away from this, what would that be?
A piece of advice, I would say that job hunting is a struggle. Like coming out of school, you are a junior. There's like a lot of competition, maybe because of the amount of layoffs that's happening. But I think that being motivated is very hard. But because you're waiting for responses from recruiters and doing a lot of interviews that may not go anywhere, I think reflecting back on those like rejections and interviews, like there is something to learn out of it. And it's easy to feel down about a rejection, but I think keeping yourself busy by doing side projects volunteer work or freelance work is very helpful in occupying your time and learning something out of it, even though you're unemployed. So I would say that take those as a learning lesson from like rejections and interviews, and motivation is a big thing. I think doing side projects and joining online communities and finding people to learn from and mentorship is very helpful during this time. Like, since you do have a lot of time, there's a ton of resources online that you can do. And yeah, I think that's what I did. And it was really helpful, especially doing mentorship. There are like websites out there where designers are very open to offer mentorship. And it's like the best time to do it because like you're not working and you do have time to reflect on yourself and your strengths and weaknesses and follow another designer's advice.
Thank you. I think that's great advice that folks will find very useful from their day to day and trying to get into this industry. Thank you so much for your time and chatting through your experience and getting through your first job and the hurdles. Really appreciate it. If folks want to connect with you or want to learn more about you, where can they go?
You can find me at LinkedIn or Twitter.
I'll definitely link the resources and ways to connect with Anna. Cool. All right. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much.